The modern age, with all its boastful claims, has left action behind, betraying humanity's most primal hope, and thus committing a crime most savage. This offense alone warrants the abandonment of the entire system, if only we had the courage and the spirit to do so. But there remains a glimmer of hope, a call to arms that seeks to rekindle the fire in the hearts of the masses. For too long, the ruling elite have wielded their hollow doctrines and grandiose visions as instruments of oppression, a contagion that sprang forth from the so-called Age of Reason and has since festered and spread like a cancer. This bureaucratic hierarchy, with its callous disregard for human life, has wrought atrocities beyond measure. Ignorance, apathy, and brutal aggression have all played their part in the needless deaths of millions, casualties of a system that prizes power over people. And yet, even as we bear witness to the horrors wrought by this flawed model, we continue to cling to simplistic narratives that do little to address the complex realities at hand. Left-wing circles paint the economically disadvantaged as the in-group, pitted against the economically privileged out-group. But in doing so, they ignore the many nuances of wealth, the socio-cultural dilemmas that accompany finance, and the larger cultural stigmas that underpin our current predicament. Meanwhile, right-wing circles portray the in-group as downtrodden patriots struggling to reclaim former glory, facing off against an out-group comprised of the elites at the gates of representative democracies. Yet in doing so, they fail to acknowledge the duplicity of opposing those who strive for better wages while claiming to be against the upper echelons of society. The truth is that neither of these reductive analyses can fully capture the complexity of the challenges we face in modernity. Human struggles arise from human problems, our capacity to harm one another, our pride, and our cognitive dissonance in acknowledging our own flaws. While Abrahamic religions have long embraced concepts like original sin, in the case of Western Christianity, and the need to adjust deviations from the destined path, in the case of Islam, the modern Western man has largely abandoned such ideas. Instead, he has turned to atheism and agnosticism as a panacea for his woes, believing that the problems of the world can be solved through empirical truth and objective testing. But even as he clings to these methods, they have proven woefully inadequate in the face of society's flaws. Technological advancement has not inspired us to strive for a better path, but rather has accelerated the human flaws of greed, lust, and pride, hastening the otherwise gradual process of an early postmodernist decay. In light of these stark realities, we must confront our present circumstances with unwavering sincerity. It is only through such an honest appraisal that we can aspire to build a future that is truly equitable, just, and sustainable. The ideas set forth in this discourse are not my own, but rather, they capture the essence of a solitary cowboy, scavenging through the putrefying grounds of Western dichotomy. The primacy of action, as a solution not only to the dilemmas within our personal lives, but also to the broader structure of humanity, extends beyond mere rhetoric to become a practical necessity. When faced with the pressing question of how to combat the deleterious effects of modernity and the postmodernist malaise that has gradually taken hold of the West, it is incumbent upon us to examine what it means to be Western. In the context of this discourse, West refers to the sphere of influence encompassing the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union, which has now expanded to encompass, arguably, the entire world through the dissemination of media, language, as well as political, economic, and military influence. On the other hand, nations such as the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, and most of the Middle East may be construed as constituting the geographic and cultural East. Societies that possess markedly distinct customs and traditions, and have learned to leverage intolerance and the exertion of strength to their advantage. Although one may critique the policies of such nations, which are often authoritarian in nature, one cannot ignore the benefits of their intricate and rigorous systems, such as reduced prison populations, high-speed rail networks that obviate the need for automobiles and highways, robust education systems, and sophisticated manufacturing conglomerates that drive the innovation of consumer goods production. Additionally, These nations boast some of the world's most advanced cybersecurity systems. Some populists in the West contend that not emulating these models is the price that Westerners must pay for democracy and freedom. However, this notion has been proven false by the emergence of relatively socially free developing economies in the East. Democracies in East Asia with advanced and complex political systems maintain their traditions rigorously, and the same can be said of Eastern Europe. This duality enables them to embrace the beneficial aspects of interconnectedness and economic dominance from the West, while also leveraging the advantages of uniformity, adaptability, and discipline present only in the East. Such cultures illustrate that the problem does not lie in the right to choose to live one's life on one's own terms, but rather emerges from the negative side effects of modern conditioning. In the wake of modernity, the West has seen the rise of an unprecedented cultural rot, which has resulted in the decay of its social and political structures. The rapid proliferation of technology, the spread of consumerism, and the rise of individualism have led to a disconnection from traditional values and the loss of a sense of community. As a result, the West has become increasingly fragmented and vulnerable to external pressures. At the same time, the rest of the world is pushing back against Western hegemony. Countries in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East are seeking to establish their own identities and are rejecting the imposition of Western cultural norms. They are asserting their own values, traditions, and systems of governance, and are becoming increasingly resistant to Western influence. This is a natural reaction to the perceived cultural imperialism of the West, which has sought to impose its values on the rest of the world. To address these challenges, the West needs to embrace a new form of neo-traditionalism. This involves a return to traditional values, such as community, family, and respect for authority, as well as a rejection of the excesses of modernity. By doing so, the West can appeal to the rest of the world and take it like an eagle under its wing. This new form of neo-traditionalism is not a call for a return to the past, but rather a recognition that the excesses of modernity have resulted in a loss of meaning and purpose in our lives. By reconnecting with our traditions, we can find a sense of purpose and meaning that is lacking in our modern lives. We can also find a sense of community and belonging that is vital for our well-being. Moreover, by embracing neo-traditionalism, the West can demonstrate to the rest of the world that it is not a monolithic entity that seeks to impose its values on others. Rather, it is a diverse and complex civilization that is capable of adapting and evolving to changing circumstances. By embracing its own traditions and values, the West can show that it is willing to engage with the rest of the world on an equal footing, and to respect the unique identities and values of other cultures. Ultimately, the embrace of neo-traditionalism is not only necessary for the survival of the West, but also for the well-being of humanity as a whole. The excesses of modernity have resulted in a loss of meaning and purpose in our lives, and have led to a sense of disconnection and isolation. By reconnecting with our traditions, we can find a sense of purpose and meaning that is vital for our well-being, and can create a more sustainable and equitable world for ourselves and for future generations. The movement towards a world free from the rot of modernity and Western hegemony is a serious and challenging one, and it begins with the individual. Each person must strive to dedicate all their efforts towards discovering their life purpose, and in doing so, embrace the spiritual essence that lies within them. In spiritual terms, every human body contains a soul, and it is through connecting with this spiritual force that we can find our purpose in the physical realm. However, the consumerist culture that dominates the modern world has misled many individuals into believing that financial freedom is their ultimate goal. While financial independence may provide some level of freedom, it cannot grant us true control over our actions and lives. The Abrahamic religions, such as Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, all emphasize the importance of spiritual control and turning to God to guide us towards our true purpose. Similarly, Buddhist and Hindu traditions teach that we must look within ourselves to find the spiritual force that drives us towards our life purpose. Regardless of the approach we take, we must strive towards action independence, which should ideally come after financial independence. It is not necessary, although arguably economically possible, for every individual to be wealthy. In fact, this would quickly lead to the detriment of the worth of material possessions and further meaninglessness in a society already desperate for meaning. Instead, we should aim to interact, speak, and show our presence within the modern world in order to fight it at its core. We cannot solve the problems of society by isolating ourselves from it. The modern world's problems lie at the core of our domain and are reflected through the majority of individuals who follow the same rudimentary patterns and share only plain sentiments. To effect change, we must use the demand for scientific and empirical evidence that has taken hold in the West and use it to deplete modernity of its credibility. Through objective research projects, the scientific community has inadvertently found substantial proof that the current system of sociological structure is unfeasible. Although many studies have been discredited, censored, or disappeared along with their authors and originators, many still remain, blaming the modern man and his reliance on consumerism and government protection for the slow decline of Western society. These studies may be used to convert atheists or agnostics to follow a spiritually Abrahamic manner of thinking, which emphasizes individualism and clarity through escaping the claws of modern thought, or lack thereof. To truly be free, we must have enough resources to purchase books, travel, and absorb esoteric knowledge. By doing so, we can live our lives unlike the rest and see ourselves as pioneers of action primacy, a relic of our ancestral heritage in a world that has largely forgotten it. Action primacy has encouraged our ancestors to invent fire, rise out of the ashes of the Garden of Eden's ideals, create great monuments, temples, and rituals that capture the essence of our humanity, and keep the explorative and intuitive side of the world turning. It has been the origin of literature, which created a contender for the primacy of ideas. It is essential to abandon the hopes of an immediately satisfying tomorrow and face the challenges of today. Living in fear, scrutiny, and taking offense to the world denies its righteous glory. By embracing neo-traditionalism and rejecting the rot of modernity and Western hegemony, the West can appeal to the rest of the world and take it like a mother eagle takes a hatchling under its wing. The path is difficult, but the rewards are great for those who are willing to undertake the journey towards true freedom and spiritual fulfillment. If we are doing things wrong, that must mean there is a way to do things right. We have borne witness through history to the trope of the evolved man, the one who strides into a city of stone and transforms it into a temple of marble. He who declares his arrival, surveys his domain, and claims dominion over all he sees. The very borders of nations and continents bend to his will, and ideologies are fashioned in his wake. Such figures as Genghis Khan and Napoleon Bonaparte have left indelible imprints upon the world, and it is their kind that inspires this tome. Our idolatry of the leaders and statesmen of the West has led us to believe falsehoods. We must cease at once glorifying mere men in the dozens and acknowledge that true greatness is not achieved by the hundreds who sit in our parliaments and congressional assemblies, but rather is honed by only several men of the earth at a time, born and forged from ashes once in a blue moon. If we are to construct a world that is more efficient, more spiritual, more meaningful, and more disciplined, then we must rely on these exceptional beings to shepherd us through the valley of darkness and the toughest of times.